My final game at CanCon was against Andrew Noakes from Melbourne, playing Morat Aggression Force. He was extremely experienced and introduced himself as having taught the Loss of Lieutenant guys everything they know. He was extremely kind and friendly, and on a number of occasions when lines of fire or rules were under discussion, he was willing to concede every time, meaning that we could discuss the outcome without having any ego investment. This was easily the most fun game I played at CanCon, even though we made a mistake with the timing. We figured that since there was only one afternoon game on the Sunday, we'd be able to take our time. But the tournament organisers were eager to finish at 3 o'clock so that people could get home and so on. So we took it far too casually during deployment and turn 1. And then we had to rush turns 2 and 3. Andrew's demeanour meant that this really wasn't a problem though. It's difficult for me to recreate my opponent's army list in this game, since Morat units all sound like alien words and I can't really tell them apart that well. I'm pretty sure I've got the main core fire team correct at the top here. It was led by the Kaitok, and it definitely had some smoke and a paramedic and a heavy machine gun, so I think those are all correct. And in the group 2 you can see I've put the Harris there, although I have no idea what his combat groups were. You can see it's got a heavy rocket launcher, the multi-sniper with +1 burst and a medikit, and aside from that he had 2 Gakis, one on each flank. The board was nice, with a cool Asian aesthetic. There are a lot of holes in the terrain and a lot of lengthy fire lanes, especially from second story buildings. We discussed it beforehand and decided that a lot of the smaller holes in the woodwork would be solid, and that the buildings would not be infinitely tall. The building's owner dropped by during the game and recommended that the building should be infinitely tall, and this was how Rob Shepard played on this board, but it was too late by then. I was very lucky that a spot of bad luck on Andrew's part prevented him from dominating the board with his sniper. I took the Oniwaban list again, not knowing much about Morats specifically, but knowing a bit about Combined Army and knowing that they had access to some fantastic tags and heavy infantry, and also knowing that in cryogenics, which I'd practiced quite a bit before coming to CanCon, you score points based on a model you designate as your master breacher, being in the table quadrants between the deployment zones. Killing his master breacher would give me a decisive advantage. In this scenario, to reveal the HVTs in each quadrant, there were objectives at the center of each quadrant that had to be activated, but only 2 of them contained HVTs, and it was random which ones contained them. After once again losing the lieutenant roll-off, I was happy that Andrew chose to take the first turn, because all I'd have to do then was stay in the game and clear him off his table quadrant in the final turn. I was concerned about the objective on this building, since it was so exposed to second story lines of fire, so I decided to take that side of the board so that I could start on the building, and I would have to try to ascend it under fire. Therefore, I deployed my Ryukin with her forward deployment prone here, protected by these railings. Also, since Rob had played on the board, this building must have been bumped, because there was about an 1.5 inch gap between it and the board edge. I deployed my Karakuri fire team there, because Andrew deployed a core fire team of heavy infantry, with a Kaitok master breacher behind this building, and I hoped that the Karakuri could play their approach through these fire lanes. I declared the Domaru in this team to be my master breacher, because I expected the Karakuri to take a lot of fire, and I usually managed to keep my Domaru in cover for most of the game. This would turn out to be a mistake. The Samurai Coring Ojimbo I placed centrally around here, with the Tenko with a missile launcher up in this rooftop, because I knew from experience with cryogenics that the second half of the game revolves entirely around only one half of the board, the half where the HVTs are revealed to be, and I wanted them to be able to move quickly to the right, because I intended to leave that tech coffin's activation until 1 or 2 tech coffins had already failed their rolls. Therefore, I deployed my Oniwaban here, to avoid the risk of failing an infiltration roll again, but also to put him in position to react to the enemy's fire team approaching. Andrew also deployed a Harris with a sniper, heavy rocket launcher and paramedic on this rooftop, and one of his Gakis here. In his first turn, he started by running the Gaki down this side of the board and killing my remote. He then moved his sniper and heavy rocket launcher Harris to the edge of this building and wounded my missile launcher Tenko, who gutsed to prone. His heavy infantry corps threw down smoke here and moved to confront the Karakuri along this fire lane. He put 2 wounds on the Karakuri before she gutsed away, and put down a couple of picture repeaters here and here. This one was particularly annoying, since to get it I'd have to come out in front of the building from this angle, and most of that was covered Most of the building on all sides was covered by its zone of control. In my first turn, I repaired the Karakuri to full hit points and moved her away from the repeater in this direction. I knew that since she didn't have stealth, she might get oblivioned, but Andrew whiffed his roll and saved me from having to engineer her again. That let me take some pot shots at his sniper in the roof, but unfortunately I lost the roll and took another 2 wounds, and was forced to retreat back here, just out of range of the zone of control of the repeater. This meant that I would not get any points at the end of the first round for having a dominant Master Breacher. I moved the Ryukin prone to this objective and activated it. Annoyingly, it contained an HVT, and I didn't have enough orders to set up shock mines, suppressive fire, cyber mask, or civivac the HVT, which would all have been good choices in the circumstances. Instead, I moved Yojimbo up and dumped his crazy koalas. I also stood my missile launcher tanko up, surviving the face-to-face roll with the sniper, even though I didn't do any damage. I moved the rest of the samurai forward a little bit and ended my turn. In Andrew's second turn, he fired his Harris heavy rocket launcher at my Flammenspier tanko, but he forgot that I had a turret here and it killed the heavy rocket launcher. He failed the paramedic roll too, leaving his sniper without the +1 burst fireteam bonus, although my Flammenspier tanko was wounded. I think his core fireteam also managed to kill my missile launcher tanko in this turn. On the left side of the board, his Gaki ran up the stairs and survived all of the submachine gun shots my Ryukin took at him, and made it into melee. I was furious when his Gaki also won the face-to-face melee roll, but thankfully I passed my save for my Ryukin, and the Gaki died to the crazy koalas. At this point, however, Andrew dropped a Razyat onto the table here, and walked up the stairs and killed my Ryukin. I'm not sure why he chose not to open either of his tech coffins, even though opening 2 is worth 2 objective points. It's possible he was waiting for the duds to open so he could at least get one on his side of the board. In my second turn, I healed the Karakuri back up to full health again, much to Andrew's frustration, and without the bonus burst she easily took out his second story sniper and advanced into the right table quadrant and opened the tech coffin. I did this because I really wanted to guarantee the 2 points of opening 2 tech coffins, and I didn't think I stood a chance of getting onto Andrew's side of the board. Surprisingly, this one also contained an HVT, so I was lucky that they were both on my side of the table. Next, Yojimbo laid down some smoke here, so that my Kempei Tai could fire through it at Andrew's heavy infantry corps. The Kempei Tai killed one of the fireteam members. I spent the rest of the turn putting my teams into stronger defensive positions. I wasn't sure whether my Oniwaban was allowed to occupy the same space as other models, so I left a gap for him with the Karakuri fireteam. But when I looked it up later, this was unnecessary. In Andrew's third turn, there was a lot of time pressure, so he got down to business. He ran his Master Breacher Kaitok forward, shrugging all of my AROs off, and dropping 4 chain cult templates on all 3 members of my fireteam. I had to choose between shooting back, dodging, or breaking the fireteam and splitting my AROs. I chose to dodge because I didn't want the fireteam to break, and I didn't want my Master Breacher to die. I was pretty confident he'd survive a dodge because of his Fizz 14. Unfortunately he whiffed it and roasted alive. The Karakuri and Oda passed, however, and I used the dodge to spread them apart so that he couldn't template them both at once again. But this was unnecessary because Andrew had no interest in doing anything but legging it to safety with his Master Breacher, now he'd killed mine. This time, even though the Karakuri's shots plinked off his armour, Yuriko Oda's actually managed to go through and score 2 wounds, taking the Kaitok down. He had a paramedic in his core fireteam and revived the Kaitok and ran him behind the building. But I was happy because he couldn't set up his defense properly, because he didn't have enough orders remaining, and the Kaitok was still very far forward. This left me with a fighting chance, even though my Master Breacher was dead. Bearing in mind the time constraints, in my third turn, I just ignored everything and revealed my Oniwaban. Andrew was astonished I'd had the resolve to hold on to my Oniwaban until the final turn of the game, having previously concluded that I didn't have anything in hidden deployment, especially since I didn't roll an infiltration roll, which is one of the reasons I prefer to deploy my Oniwaban on my side of the table. The Oniwaban sprinted after the Kaitok, and was revealed by the first and only Discover roll he'd have to encounter. Thankfully, he was still within range of the Kaitok and immediately closed the distance, taking a lot of AROs in the process, meaning that I was only going to get 1 shot. I elected to use his EMCC weapon since I only needed 1 wound, and I preferred the extra dice on hit, and the extra damage for martial arts. I won the face-to-face roll and Andrew failed one of his saves. I ended the game instantly. I'd won 5-4 with 2 points from activating 2 tech coffins, 2 points for dominating this quadrant containing an HVT, and 1 point for finishing round 2 with the dominant Master Breacher. Andrew had 2 points for finishing rounds 1 and 2 with the dominant Master Breacher, and 2 points from dominating the other HVT with his Parachutist. I could have tried to dislodge his Parachutist after killing his Master Breacher to win 5-2, but there just wasn't time, and I was extremely happy just to win. I'm honestly not sure I had the orders anyway, and in the end, I finished CanCon with 3 wins from 5 games. I'd like to pick an MVP trooper from across the tournament, but this is difficult because most of my models had at least one bad game. The Oni Warbin I only ran twice, and only had an impact in the last game. The Karakuri constantly took 2 wounds from single orders despite her total immunity, cover and armor. The Killer Hacking Device Ryokan won me the first game, and even when I over with her in the second game she still went down fighting. But in the third she accomplished nothing, in the fourth I forgot to capture the objective with her, and in the fifth she found an HVT in an awkward spot and almost died to a Gaki. The Samurai, they had a different star every time, but the most consistent member of the fighting was the Kempe Tai. He at least managed to survive every game, and managed to cause at least 1 casualty in every game. Therefore, I think he's my MVP. All of my games were a lot of fun against great opponents, and I finished on a bit of a high. Thanks again to all of my opponents, all of the tournament organisers, and everyone who helped me to prepare for CanCon.